Hey guys, today I have a very easy tutorial for you. I want to show you how to make hand warmers using the mini skulls pattern. And this one is crocheted in the round using single crochet stitches. So you can actually customize this to fit any hands, like children's or adults. And you can also use any kind of contrasting colors that you like. For this one I used black and white, but for the actual tutorial I'm going to be using a variegated merino wool that I left over from another project. I'm using this because it shows up better on camera than black does. So these gloves are crocheted in the round and they have a seam along here, and when we have the thumb holes we're going to be adding border stitches and then starting again working in the round. I'll definitely do a close-up so you can see a little bit better, but these are pretty easy, and let's head over into my studio and I will show you how to make these. Okay, we are ready to get started making these hand warmers, and we are going to start with the background color, and we're also going to want a color for the skulls. So we can put this one aside for now. I'm using a acrylic wool blend. I would recommend using 100% wool when making hand warmers because your hands get a lot of use and acrylic doesn't usually hold up very well. For this yarn here, I have a hand-dyed yarn that I bought from Etsy, and for this project I'm going to be using a worsted weight yarn and my trusty antique super old H-hook. And we'll begin here. All we're going to do to start with is just start making chains. We are going to make a long enough chain to fit around the base of our hand. And I'm not even going to count, I'm just estimating, and you can make this any length that you like. So you're going to want to make your chain to fit around this part of your hand here without it being too tight. You do want to have a little bit of give because as you're crocheting up this way, your hand gets a lot wider here, and therefore you don't want it to be super tight. So this, if it fits comfortably around your hand here, that's a pretty good size to start with, and our seam is going to be on the inside over here. Once you have a chain long enough to fit around your hand, we can start adding single crochet stitches and starting from the second chain from the hook. And just single crochet all the way across to the end. And here we are at the end of the first row, and we're going to want to connect the beginning to the last stitch that we just did here. We're going to want to make sure that this is straight and not twisted anywhere. And insert your hook into these first two loops at the very beginning. And we're going to take our new yarn and slip stitch with the new yarn through both of these. So through those first two loops and then through the last loop on this side. Make sure you tighten the first color and also tighten this new white one also, and we are going to make one chain, and we're going to just leave it like this because now we're going to turn it upside down to connect these two together at the bottom. So when you're doing a regular single crochet across, you're going to have this little gap at the bottom, and we want to seal this gap. And the way that I do that is I take this tail and weave it over onto this side so it's straight on the bottom. So we are going to insert our hook into this bottom part here, pull through the tail all the way through. So now it's kind of straight there, and then we're going to weave it back through this way. So put your hook into this side, and pull the tail to the back. Into the back, all the way through. So now when we turn this over, we want to connect, find these two tails right here, and we're going to just tie them. Now we're going to flip it the other way, so the right side is facing out and the tails will be on the inside here. And now we have our new yarn, which we can put our hook back in and retighten it. Before starting the second row, make sure you tighten both strands back here, and we can drop this first color and start working this one. And we are going to start with a chain loosely. And we already did one down here when we attached the yarn, but we're going to need this one to be looser, so when we go into the third row, this is the one where we're going to be going through both of those. And now we can start row 2 with all single crochet into the top back loops for the entire row. At the very last stitch in the row, we're going to go through both loops instead of just the top loop. This is going to end up being where we add border stitches later on when we add the thumb holes. So just for the last stitch in every single row, we are going to go through both loops and add a single crochet. And now we start row 3 into the first chain into both loops. And now we're going to take our first color and slip stitch through the first 2 and this one. Hold your hook in the middle here at the widest part and tighten the white. This way it keeps this stitch here looser, and then it makes it easier to go into on the next round. And now loosely chain 1 and we start this row. And this one we are going to actually stop and measure where we want to have the skulls on these gloves. So we can pull this and take that out just to measure. So if you put your hand in and line up the seam on the inside here, what I like to do is take a stitch marker and mark where you would like the center of your skulls to be. So for me, I kind of like that right there as the center. And when we're looking at the chart for the mini skulls, these are going to be 7 stitches across. So for one single skull, because the pattern is 6 plus 1, that makes one of them 7. So we want 7 stitches, and the center point would be the 3rd stitch. So we'll count to the 3rd stitch over here and mark it. And then on this side, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we'll mark that one as well. And you can take out the center one and close these up. So now when we begin the 3rd row, we'll know where we want the mosaic part to be. Now we're ready to start the 3rd row, and we will do single crochet top loops only up to the stitch marker. Now that we're at the part where we want to add the mosaic part, we can take out the first stitch marker and we'll take a look at our chart to see that the first 2 stitches are double crochet. So we will add them down here into the row below. 1, 2, and then the next 3 stitches are single crochet. So top loops, 1, 2, 3, and again at our chart we're stopping at this one right here, so we have 2 more double crochet to finish, and we can take out the stitch marker at this point on this side, so we're only adding 2 more. So down here, double, and double down here. And now for the rest of the row, single crochet stitches in the top back loops only, and then I will show you again how to do the seam. And now for the end of the 3rd row, before you get to the last stitch here, go through both loops, single crochet, and then you're gonna push this first one down, and we're going into both loops of this chain back here. And now we're going to pick up the white and slip stitch through the first 2 loops and this one. Put your hook on the wide part and tighten this side. And to make it a little bit easier, give yourself a little bit of room, and then chain. And now you can easily see where the mosaic part starts, so you always know, you can count how many stitches you add before you start the mosaic. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yours might be different depending on where you marked your skulls. And this is always going to be where the mosaic skull will go. It's kind of a border here to keep track. So the next part of the chart shows 2 single, 3 double, 2 single. So 2 single, top back loop, top back loop, and 3 double down in the white. 1, 2, 3, and 2 single back here. And now we can finish row 4 all the way across, top row back loops. Okay, last stitch on row 4, both loops. Insert your hook into both loops of the chain. Drop the white, pick up the blue, slip stitch through those, slip stitch through that one, position your hook in the center, pull the white, and loosely chain 1 and start the row again. Single crochet, top row back loops, And when you get to the mosaic section here, in the pattern for row 5, we have 1 double crochet, 5 singles, and we're ending with a double crochet at the last stitch. And that looks like this. Double, single, top row back loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the end with a double crochet down here to finish the skull. And now we're going to finish row 5, single crochet all the way around, top row back loops. So now that you have the basics of how to go around and add this seam here, we're going to skip ahead and I'm going to just continue showing you how to do this mosaic section. But what I want you to keep in mind is when you're making these, what I find is this one skull is a good distance before splitting the seam and starting to add the thumb hole here. But if you're making this smaller, like for a kid size, you want to actually pay attention to how far it is, because you don't want it all the way back here, or worse, keep it to around this part here. So when you see that the thumb needs to have a hole at that point, I would stop adding here and we can skip ahead and I will show you how to do this part here. I'll leave a timestamp in the description so you'll know when to start adding this part here. And now we're ready for row 6. And row 6 is single, double, single, double, single, double, single. Easy. So now that we've done the first section here, which count how many stitches you have, and it will always be the same amount. So I have 5. I will always have 5 single crochet stitches here before this starts. So let's do single, top back loop, double down here into white, single, back up here, top back loop, double, back down into white, single, back up here, top back loop, double, back down into white, and finish with a single top back loop. And you can see the skull starting to form with these eyes. And I will continue around and meet you at row 7. And now we're ready for row 7, and row 7 is just as easy as row 6. It's reversed now. So we have double, single, double, single, double, single, double. And what does that mean? We're going into all of the spaces in between and keeping the middle ones at the top. So let's do double down here, single up here, double down here, we got one eye, single up here, double down here, single, and finishing with the double down here. And row 8 is the fun one. I'll meet you back on the other side. Okay, now we're ready for the fun row, row 8, which is the main reason why I wanted to do this video in the first place. So I made a special stitches video that talked about how to do a regular DC decrease centered, which is 2 double crochet stitches that attach into one at the top, and this one has single crochet stitches behind each of them. And this one is different because the center one here that I have circled, you're actually going to be sharing this stitch space between both DC decreases. And this centered one here is a single crochet that is going to be shared between both of these. So let me show you how to do that, because that was not included in my first video. So the first stitch on row 8 is a single. So we'll start there. And now let's do the DC decrease centered. And every time you see a D with a line above it, that means we need to add a single crochet stitch. So we'll start with a single, and we're going to start the DC decrease directly below the stitch that we just did. So yarn over, insert your hook down here, pull through 1 loop, pull through 2 loops, and stop. We have 2 loops on our hook. We're going to be skipping this middle section here and start the next DC down here. So yarn over, put your hook into that, and pull through 1 loop, pull through 2 loops, and stop when you have 3. Pull through all 3 loops, and we're going to add a single crochet stitch directly above this one right here, top row back loop back here, to finish the DC decrease centered. So that is what a standard one would look like. But now that we're going to be adding another one, sharing the stitch space, we already have our single crochet here, which is what we started with over here. So we're also using this to start the next one here. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook back into this hole in the center here. Pull through 1, pull through 2 loops, and stop. Skip this stitch in the middle. We're going to go over here, yarn over, insert your hook, pull through 1, pull through 2 loops. When you have 3 on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3, and we will finish with a single crochet directly above this last stitch. And that finishes the second set of DC decreases. And that is what the top of this skull looks like. And to finish row 8 in the chart, we have 1 more single crochet. And then we can continue the row all the way around, and I will meet you for row 9. And now we are ready for row 9, which is the last row of this chart. And here we have 2 DCs, 3 singles, and 2 doubles. So when we're looking here, this is where the first one is going. So double. And the second one is hard to see because we are crossing over here. So this is actually a hidden stitch in there. So we'll add our second DC in that part. Now it crosses over it and it's behind it. So then we'll add 3 singles at the top. 1, 2, 3. And on this side as well, it's in there. That's where we're adding our double crochet. And our second down here. And that is our first skull all done. And now I'm going to meet you at the seam and show you how to split the seam. When you're ready to split the seam, we're going to start adding border stitches instead of continuing around. So this will start to become open. We've already been putting our hook into 2 loops, so this makes it very easy to add a border stitch at this point. So again, put your hook through both loops on the last stitch, and instead of going over here, we're going to pull down and tighten it, chain 1, tighten, and we're cutting it, and pull through, and this will be the beginning of the opening. Now, as before, we're going to insert our hook into the 2 loops as if we were going to slip stitch, but now we're going to take this and start a border stitch on this side. So pull through, chain 1, and we're going to continue adding our stitches, single all the way across, and when we get to the mosaic section, we are starting the pattern over from row 2. And row 2 is all single crochet stitches all the way across. So we're just going to continue adding single crochet clear across the top of this without any overlay stitches into the skull. So just all the way across, and I'll meet you back at the seam to add more border stitches. And at the end of this row here, we have our border stitch to go into here. So to add an ending border stitch, insert your hook into the 2 loops at the end, single crochet, pull down to tighten, chain 1, pull down to tighten, and cut. Pull through, you can tighten it again, and now we do not have any yarn to pull through to add another row, so now our starting border stitch is going to go in here. So we'll insert our hook into the usual spot, these first 2 loops here, and now we'll take our background color and do a starting border stitch. So pull through, take the tail and pull that through the loop. Don't tighten yet. Put your hook back in this loop, and then we're going to chain 1 and single crochet back into the base and single crochet. So now all our border stitches will be building off of this one here. Now we can start row 3, add our single crochet stitches up to the mosaic, and now we can start again at row 3. So now you can see here that row 3 starts adding the second skull up here. We could add as many skulls as you like. For this one, I'm going to add 4 skulls high. So you can just keep following the chart to make your design as long as you would like. I'm going to finish this row here and meet you back on this side again to show you how to add another border stitch on top of this one. And this one right here is where the border stitch on this side is going to be from now on. So put your hook into both of these loops, take your yarn, pull through, make a loop, pull through the tail, insert your hook back into the hole, chain 1, single crochet back into the base of that hole. And now this will begin row 4 after all of these. The opening of the thumb holes is entirely up to you and your hand size. So for the example that I have from this one, I have this one with 12 rows where it's open with border stitches, and then for the 13th row I'm connecting it back again with crocheting in the round. I've gone ahead and added several more rows here, and I counted in the back here I have 13 border stitches, and at this point I want to start closing this up again. And when you have your piece, you're going to want to try it on to see where this bottom part meets on this side, where it's the most comfortable for you. And for me, that ends up being just about here. You can see here, it's pretty close on this end here. So we're going to close this one up like that. But before we do that, the easiest thing to do is to weave in the ends now before we close this up, because it's a lot easier to get to and you don't have to flip it inside out when you have this part open. So I have a needle here, and we can start working in these ends onto the inside to hide them. And when you're working with tails that are short like this, since they're already locked in here, we don't really have to worry about weaving them in several times. What I'm doing really is just hiding them inside here. And of course, when you're wearing the glove, they're not going to really pop out. I've never had them pop out before, so I only just go in once. Start by weaving in your needle first, and make sure that you're not sticking the needle through any of the front stitches, because you don't want that to show through the front. So we go through a few of the same color to hide it in here and get the tail out of the way. And now you can take the tail and thread the needle, thread it just a little bit, and pull through. And we're going to continue doing this for all of these, and I would wait to trim these so you're not changing between scissors and the needle. You can just keep it in your hand and just keep going all the way down the row. I've woven in all the ends on both sides, and now I'm just coming in here and cutting any excess tails to make it nice and clean on the inside too. And now we are ready to start crocheting in the round again. And this is going to be so much easier now that we don't have any of the ends in the way. And in order to do that, we're going to add one last border stitch here, and we're going to add this color in here. The only difference is going to be on this side, we're not going to be adding a border stitch. We're going to be continuing and slip stitching into the stitch that we're making right here. So let's finish this row around, and I will meet you right here. Okay, we're back on this side, and just like we did down here, we have one stitch left, and this was the border stitch from the previous row. And what we're going to do again is go through both loops and single crochet, and now we're going to take this side here and put our hook into the two stitches, and we're going to stop right here and get the next color to slip stitch. And just like we did before, we're going to slip stitch through 2 and the one on this side and hold it, and we're going to tighten the white one here. Nice and tight. And now we're going to take this tail and tie it to the white one to secure it together. And then now we have these 2 tails on the inside here that we can weave in after we're done. We'll just tuck these in for now. So now we have our 2 strips ready to go. To make this nice and secure right here, I'm going to go through both loops again in here and single crochet, and then when we come around the second round, this is the stitch we're going to be attaching to instead of this one. We're going to make it stronger by putting it up here. And now we are ready to continue across this row. And I'll meet you one more time on this side to show you how this connects for the next row. And here we are finished with this row on this side and the row by going through both loops of the last stitch. And now you're going to slip stitch the next color here. So insert into these 2 loops. And to make sure that you're going into the right spot, you can also count. We always have 5, so now we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before the mosaic part starts. And again, we will slip stitch this one. Hold the hook in the middle. Tighten the blue one. Chain 1, and this is the one we will be connecting to in the next round. And we can continue again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all top back loops. And you can keep going and making this as long as you like, but for this example I'm only going to make 4 skulls, because then I'm going to show you how to do the other side, and the only real difference is the way the seam is placed on the left hand. But isn't it looking really cool so far? I love how this yarn makes all these fun designs. Once you're done adding all of the skulls for your hand warmer, what I like to do is add 1 more row to finish this off and make it nice and clean on the edge here. You can go through both loops, but I kind of like the way it looks with just going through 1 loop instead, and it makes it a little bit longer too. So all we need to do is just go around 1 more time. And then once you're back at this side, at the last stitch here, you can tighten it, chain 1, pull through, and to make sure that this is not uneven here, what I usually do is go through the back of this first stitch here through both loops, and then I just pull this tail through, and this helps even it out right here. Then you can turn this inside out, attach the tails together with a knot, and then weave them in on the inside, and this part is done. And what's really cool about variegated yarn and this pattern is sometimes you get skulls with different color eyes, which is so cool looking. Okay, so to finish, now that we have this side all finished up, this edge should be finished as well. So what we're gonna do on this side, can start right here where the seam is, and just attach your yarn. And what I'm going to do is actually go through these bigger holes. Let's see if you can, there you go. You can see when you make a chain in the very beginning, you're left with these holes here. And what I'm going to do is slip stitch in between all of these holes all the way around to kind of camouflage them and finish off this bottom edge here. And this way, it's just as thick as it is down here on both sides. So let's start doing that. Adding slip stitches into the larger holes all the way around. And we're back at the beginning on this side, and just finish off the slip stitches by going back into the first hole that we started in and slip stitch, chain one, tighten, cut, pull through, and again we can put our hook back in here and pull this tail through, so both tails are now facing the inside, and we can weave these in to hide them. And then this is all set. And here's what the right hand looks like, all finished. Nice clean edges. And we are ready to start on the left side. For the left side here, the only difference between the left and the right is the seam is going to be on this side. So when we count our stitches from the seam to where the skull is going to start, you're going to want to have to face it this way, with the seam being over here. This way, when you have them on like this, they're both facing out, and you won't have skulls on the inside of one and the outside of the other. I'm just going to pull this and show you where the seam is. So on the right side, the seam was on the inside here, but since we're doing it left, we are going to be turning it this way, so the seam is on the right side, and then you'll be working it this way, which makes the middle of the skull is going to be over here instead. So we need to count the stitches to make sure we're marking it in the right spot. This very first stitch here, which is actually the last stitch when you are working that way, we're going to count that one because this is the stitch we're going to be going through both loops, just like we did on this side. So we're going to count this one as one, and then we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This next one is where we want to mark it. But this number could also be different depending on how many stitches you had on your right glove. And from here, we're going to want to count 7 stitches for the skull section. So this is the first one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to mark that one there. Now we can turn it back the right way and start row 3. So now you see those are actually the last stitches that we're working on instead of the first. So this is actually the back. And now that we've worked our way to the front of the left-handed gloves, we can take out our stitch markers and add row 3 in the pattern in these here. And if we counted correctly, we should have the exact same number of single crochet stitches before the one that we add into both loops, right before the seam. And I'm going to go ahead off camera and finish the left glove. And once again, it's the same steps that you would follow for making this one, but the seam is now in a different place. And that's it. And here we have our little mini skulls gloves all done, and I think these came out so cute with the variegated yarn. I absolutely recommend trying out some indie dyers. They're really good at making some very creative colors, and support small businesses, of course. The mini skulls pattern can also be made into things like pillows. And that pattern is actually available for free during the month of October 2021 whenever you buy a multi-pack of patterns, either from my Etsy store or my Ravelry store. This pattern is also available separately now, so you can get that also on Etsy or Ravelry. I have links through my website. Thanks for watching.